Hey guys, tonight we're stepping onto the blood-soaked fields and aching limbs of medieval knighthood, where shining armor wasn't forged in comfort, but hammered from sweat and sacrifice. Forget the gallant tales of courtly love and triumphal lists in storybooks. The real life of a knight was brutal. Brutal training, impossible weight, and battles where one wrong move meant the long drop from a saddle or a sentence at the gallows. So tonight, we're asking what it really took to survive a single day as a medieval knight, where your mornings began before dawn in a freezing armory, your body broke under the weight of iron and leather, and every swing of the sword could be your last. Every era had its own kind of tough, so let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always amazing to see how far our legend stretches. Now, dim the lights, pull your blanket close, and let's charge into the heart of chivalry together. You wake before the first hint of light and hear the clang of steel echoing through the corridor. Your body aches from yesterday's battle and tonight's revelry alike. Each joint crackles as you swing your legs over the edge of your straw pallet. The cold stone floor greets your feet with a shock that travels straight to your marrow. You swing your legs around and stand, swaying for a moment as the air rushes past your lungs like icy water. Your boots lie by the hearth, still slick with blood and mud. You tug them on and wince as the leather pulls against fresh cuts on your ankles. You force yourself forward through the silent armory and feel the weight of expectation settle on your shoulders. Torches flicker against the walls, casting long shadows that dance like specters across racks of helms and cuirasses. Each piece bears the dents and splatters from battles you scarcely remember. You brush past a suit of chainmail and catch the memory of steel links biting into your flesh when an enemy blade slipped past your guard. You breathe in the musk of oil and iron. You taste the grit of the forge in your mouth, a flavor that never quite leaves you. You draw your gaze to a breastplate battered with deep gouges. Yesterday's blood has crusted along its edges in rusty rivulets. You shudder but step forward, knowing you must wear the horrors of war again today. You reach for the mail shirt and lift it like a coiled serpent. The weight drapes over your arms and falls onto your shoulders with a rough embrace. You crouch and slip your arms through the armholes, feeling each ring settle against your skin. The links cling cold against your chest and arms. You stand and adjust the shirt until it covers your torso from neck to mid-thigh. You glance at your reflection in a polished helm and see a ghost of the man you were before you took up the sword. Next comes the greaves. You fasten the iron plates around your shins with leather straps that cut into your calves. You tighten each buckle until the metal presses hard against bone. You feel the cold steel clamp your skin. Each strap marks a band of pain that you will carry through the day. You step forward for the cuisses and wrap them around your thighs. The plates overlap and lock into place. You test a slow step and feel the armor move with your muscles. The weight shifts with every motion. You rise and reach for the breastplate. You heft the heavy slab of iron and guide it up to your chest. You push until it clicks over your shoulders. A squire appears with a final strap and pulls it tight against your waist. You gasp as the plate digs into your ribs. You grimace and lift your arms to allow the squire to fasten the straps under your arms. The leather groove cuts into your skin with every breath. You lean forward and exhale until the plate settles into place. A flicker of torchlight bounces off the polished iron. You run a hand across the surface and feel every groove and dent. You remember the grey dawn of the last battle, when your breastplate absorbed a glancing blow that cracked the rivet near your heart. You nod in grim respect for its service. You pat the cold metal as if it were a comrade. You close your eyes and steady your breath. You feel the strain in your back as the weight bears down. You test a stance with feet planted shoulder-width apart. Each shift sends a tremor through your arms. You imagine the swing of your sword in this armor. You recall how the blade felt balanced in your hand before the battle weighed you down. You reach for the gauntlets next. You slip your hands into the rigid plates and fumble as fingers clank against each other. You grip a helmet's brim and pull it down over your brow. The visor thunks closed with a jarring snap. Your vision narrows to a slit of darkness and torchlight. You tap the side of the helmet and feel the echo through your skull. At last, you grip your sword hilt and heft it clear of its scabbard. The blade feels lighter than your armor, but still too heavy for a man untested by dawn. You lift it overhead and hold it there, the steel humming as if alive. You let it fall in a slow arc to your side, and the shock of the motion ripples through your arms. You step back from the armor rack and plant your sword upright in the floor. You rest a hand on the pommel and let your head drop against the helmet. Your chest heaves beneath the breastplate. You taste metal and sweat. You remember the vows you swore on this very line of blades. You remember the code of honor and the songs that promised glory and gold. Your thoughts crack as you survey the armor around you. Each suit tells a story of blood and sacrifice. Each dent marks a life spared and a life lost. You feel the weight of history bearing down on you more heavily than any plate. You lift your visor and breathe deep. The world reclaims its shape in torchlight. You slide your sword back into the scabbard and prepare to step outside. Beyond the armory walls lies the first faint glow of dawn, a whisper of a new day. You tighten the straps around your waist and test your boots once more. Every joint aches, but your heart pounds with resolve. You lift your head and square your shoulders. You step forward into the corridor, your armor clanking with every breath. You feel the eyes of your ancestors in every metal link. You feel the weight of every promise you made. You feel the rigid plates of your armor clinging to your flesh like a second skin. You would not last a day here if you thought yourself untested. Yet you survived this morning's donning of steel and leather. You took every joint's crack and every breath's rasp as proof that you can endure. You brace yourself for the coming dawn, knowing that once you step into the light, the world will demand more of you than you ever thought you could give. You grip the hilt of your sword and step into the first pale rays of sunrise. Your armor creaks and groans, but you stand ready. You have risen before first light. You have wrestled with plate mail grimed by past battles. And in this moment you know that surviving one sunrise as a medieval knight earns you fierce pride that no courtly tale can ever hope to capture. The clang of steel grows louder as you step into the armory courtyard. Servants scarred by years of lifting heavy beams stand ready to hand you your shield and lance. You walk between rows of racks filled with helmets polished until they catch the dawn glow. A squire greets you with a bow and presents your shield, its face crested with your family emblem. You take it, feeling its weight in your arm and the rough grain of the wood against your palm. You carry your shield to the sharpening stone where another servant crouches. Sparks fly as the servant runs your sword's edge against the whetstone. Each pass hurls a spray of metal filings into the air. You test the blade by drawing it slowly across your gauntleted thumb and feel a halo of pain rather than the dull thunk of a blunt edge. Satisfied, you return the sword to its scabbard and reseat your shield across your back. A horn blast carries over the courtyard. You hurry toward the stables where your warhorse waits. The animal stamps its hoof in greeting. You pull the axe from your belt and cut through the thick leather straps that protect the saddle. You lift the saddle free and set it on the mounting block. You pat the horse's flank and whisper a word of praise. You fit the saddle carefully, tightening each strap until it sits snug against the horse's broad back. You fasten your lance upright on the saddle's left side and swing a leg over. The saddle creaks beneath your weight. You settle into the stirrup and feel the familiar rise and fall of your spine. You take the reins in one hand and prod your boots into the animal's side with quiet pressure. The horse shifts forward with an eager rumble. You guide it toward the open field beyond the walls where the day's drills will begin. On the training ground, dozens of knights gather with spears and shields. Each horse moves in time with its rider. You fall into line and feel the tight formation press against your shield. The sergeant of the watch, his helmet tucked under his arm, calls for a mounted charge. You lean forward and urge your horse into a gallop. The ground thuds beneath thunderous hoofbeats. You point your lance toward the dummy knight at the far end of the field. You strike true. The wood splinters against the dummy's shield and cracks through its chest plate. You reel back and steady yourself as your horse rears at the impact. You guide it in a wide circle and fall back into formation. Sweat beads under your armor even in the cold morning air. You wipe your visor free of mist and ready your sword for the next drill. Next comes shield wall. You dismount and join your fellows in a tight row, shields overlapping. A line of footmen charges at you with wooden swords. Your shield takes the brunt of each blow. Plates of metal bite into your arm, and you taste copper on your lips. Your legs shudder under the pressure of the rank behind you. You lean into your shield and brace your knee and hip against the thrust. The line wavers once, but holds firm. You shove forward until the attackers break, and retreat. You return to your horse and pick up your lance. The training sergeant orders a leap over a series of logs laid in the grass. You rise in the saddle and urge your mount forward. The animal clears the first log with ease. Your breath catches when you clear the second. You guide the horse in a gentle arc and land in a roll that sends shock through your wrist and shoulder. You test both with a flick of your sword and feel the pain ripple through your arm. You swallow and ready yourself for one more pass. After the drills, you lead your horse to the wash trough. You pour water over the horse's flank and scrub away sweat and grime. You pat the horse's neck and whisper, "Thanks for its service." You lift the saddle and set it aside for cleaning. You dip a rag in water and wipe your breastplate, washing away yesterday's blood and today's sweat. You polish the surface until it gleams. You test the plate with your palm and nod when it feels smooth. You hang your weapons on the armory rack and step away. You unlace your greaves and peel off the stiff plates. Your legs pulse with relief as you step free of the iron. You unfasten the breastplate and loosen the mail. Each ring that lifts off your skin feels like a burden falling. You fold the breastplate carefully and lay it on its hook. You slip out of the helmet and lift your hair from beneath the padded cap. You massage your scalp where the helmet pressed too tight. You swallow deeply and feel your spine straighten without the weight of plate. You stand before the wall of armor and remember that each piece will be waiting again before nightfall. You step into the armory courtyard where the morning sun now shines bright. You unlace your boots and set them in a pile with your greaves. You flex your toes against the cool cobbles. You take a deep breath of fresh air and feel each muscle awaken without the constraints of iron. You look at the courtyard and the ranks of knights who work through the ritual of training. You think of the toll it takes on body and spirit. You think of the horses strained beyond their strength, and the men broken beneath the heat and weight. You think of the brave songs and the whispered prayers that carry you through each day. You straighten your back and pull your cloak around your shoulders. You step toward the exit gate, your armor now laid aside for the hours of rest before evening call. You taste freedom on the air, fleeting as dawn. You whisper thanks that you have passed the morning drills again unbroken, but you know that by tomorrow the armory will await you again. The drills will resume at first light, the clang of steel will call your name. You will once more don that heavy mail and plate. You will once more ride across the field and fall into formation. You will once more test your mettle under the sun's glare, and in each sunrise you will prove that despite cramping muscles aching under iron and raw throats rasping beneath the helmet, you can endure. You take one last breath of morning air and carry it with you as you step beyond the gate. You have survived this dawn in the armory, and in that you earn the fierce pride of a medieval knight. You rise before dawn once more to the sound of drums rolling through the barracks yard. Your legs ache from yesterday's marching drill, and your shoulders throb under the weight of your practice sword. You step into the cold air and find your fellow knights already forging lines in the frost. The sergeant blows his horn, and you fall into formation. The first drill begins with footwork. You stand at attention, boots planted shoulder-width apart. The sergeant calls out advances and retreats. You step forward with your left foot, shifting your shield arm into guard position. You pivot on your heel and step back, lowering your blade in smooth arc. Each motion is measured and precise until your feet burn from the cold cobbles and your calves tremble under the strain. You repeat the cycle until your boots squeak and your breath comes in ragged bursts. Next comes the thrusting drill. You plant your front foot and kick your hips forward, driving the tip of your sword toward an imaginary foe. You feel the steel slice through the damp air and taste the cold wind on your tongue. You parry to the side and straighten your blade in one fluid motion. Your partner matches your rhythm with wooden practice swords. Each impact thuds through your arms and shoulder. Your knuckles whiten around the hilt with every strike. After an hour of sword work, the sergeant orders mace swings. You heft the heavy iron head and wind it above your head. You bring it down in a crushing arc aimed at the stump of a felled tree. The wood splinters on impact. You raise the mace again and strike with all your weight. Your hands blister where the handle slides in your grip. Sweat freezes on your brow and drips into your eye. You blink away the sting and press on. When the sun climbs higher, you line up for shield drills. You lock your shield face to face with your partner and push until your shoulders burn. Each shove presses marrow to bone. You sink into the stance and drive your feet into the ground. Your shield rattles from the impact but holds firm. You taste iron on your lips and grit your teeth against the burn in your arms. Next, the sergeant brings out bows and arrows. You kneel in the mud, the leather skirt of your armor folding around your legs. You knock the arrow and draw back until the string rests against your cheek. You aim at the distant target stand where a painted bullseye waits. You release and feel the string slap your forearm. The arrow thuds true. You rise and hurry to retrieve it, so the next night may test their skill. Your knuckles ache from the repeated motion, and your shoulders burn with each draw. By midday, you have sweat through every layer of armor and ground mud into every seam. The sergeant orders a march through the nearby woods. You shoulder a pack of iron weights strapped with ropes to mimic battlefield gear. You should step lightly, but the weights drag you down. You trudge a mile through mud and roots, hamstrings screaming with each step. Your lungs burn, and each breath rings with pain. You stumble over a fallen branch and nearly drop your pack. You catch yourself on the hilt of your practice sword. At the clearing, the sergeant lays out a line of spears. You strip off the weight pack and press your back against a tree to catch your breath. You wipe mud from your face and flex your arms. You grab a spear by the shaft and practice thrusts in the shade. Each jab pushes the butt of the spear deeper into the ground. You test your strength and grip. Your fingers crack under the wood. You rotate your hands and test the next spear, seeking one that will lend balance to your next drill. After the spear drill, you remount your horse for mounted exercises. You cross the clearing and mount from a low stump. Your legs tremble as you settle into the saddle. The horse snorts beneath you and steps forward. You grip the reins in one hand and lift your sword in the other. You gallop across the meadow and practice swing and return in rapid succession. Each strike shakes your wrist and shoulder. You taste sweat and dust on your lips. You guide your horse through poles set in a line. You lean forward and urge the animal into a full gallop. You twist in the saddle to strike practice targets at every pole. Each swing arcs your sword through the air and thuds against the wooden dummy. You land in a crouch and push the horse to the next pole. Your thighs burn from balancing in the stirrups. Your back aches from the cipher of metal and leather. When the horse drill ends, you dismount and steady your legs. You feel pins and needles in your feet from the stirrups. You shake out the numbness and hose down the mounting block with a bucket of cold water. The shock jolts your senses back to your body. You wipe the bridle leather and inspect each strap for fraying. You secure the bit in the horse's mouth and offer the animal a handful of oats. The horse munches gratefully, steam curling from its nostrils. You return to the courtyard for the final drill of the day wrestling in armor. You partner with a fellow knight. You lock shields and grapple for control. Each move sends steel plates grinding against each other. You twist your hips and drop your weight low. You drive your shoulder into your partner's side. He counters and flips you onto the ground. You land with a thud that rattles your teeth. You taste grit in your mouth. You roll and launch yourself back to your feet. You meet him again with shields locked and bodies pressed tight. Your limbs ache and your vision swims, but you refuse to yield. At last, the sergeant's horn blows, signaling the end of drills. You plant your sword in the ground and lean on the pommel. You feel sweat cooling on your skin and the sun slipping low toward the horizon. You pad around to remove your gauntlets. Your fingers are red and swollen where the joints have blistered. You open each finger plate and squeeze until the glove loosens. You pull it free and test your hand. Each finger throbs with pain, but you flex them and feel yourself return to flesh. You strip off your cuirass and unlace your greaves. You step out of the heavy plates and feel the air rush over your skin. You breathe deep and taste freedom on your tongue. You wipe your armor with a cloth and hang it on the rack. You swing your practice sword back into its place. Each clang echoes the day's effort. You walk from the armory yard toward the barracks. Your legs loosen under you but still shake with fatigue. You slouch through the door and find your straw pallet beckoning. You strip off the last of your damp clothing and tumble onto the bed. You stare at the rafters and the first stars of night through the narrow window. Your body hums with pain. Your spirit hums with triumph. You endured each endless drill and every blister that rules your hands. You survived this brutal training routine once more. And in that survival, you earn the pride of a true knight. The sergeant's horn blasts again, and you scramble back to your feet, muscles already trembling from the morning's exertions. No rest is offered here in the yard of practice. You are ordered to pair off for dagger drills, a dance that tests your reflexes and nerve. Your partner steps forward, dagger raised at his hip. You lean low, planting your weight on your front leg. You sense the moment he will strike, and you pivot to meet blade with blade. The daggers flash in the air, steel singing as it slips past guards. You parry an underhand thrust with the flat of your own dagger, feeling the impact jolt through your wrist. You counter with a quick riposte aimed at his thigh. He twists away just in time, but you follow through with a low slash that barely grazes his leather boot. You taste metal on your tongue and sweat on your brow. Each parry and thrust rings through your soul like a hammer on anvil. After 10 minutes, the sergeant calls halt. You step back, chest heaving, and wipe blood from a shallow cut on your forearm. You press your palm to the wound and feel sticky warmth seeping between your fingers. You rinse your hand in a bucket of water and bind the cut with clean cloth. Your fingers shake as you tie the knot. You glance at your partner. He nods in respect, and you return the gesture despite the ache that runs through your veins. Next comes the shield bash drill. You and a comrade lock shields and charge at each other from opposite ends of the yard. You grip your shield's center boss and lean all your weight into the rush. Your feet churn the dirt as you lunge. You clash shields at the midpoint with a crack that reverberates across the courtyard. The shock throws you off balance, and mud sprays your greaves. You slam your shield boss into your opponent's chest and drive him back 3 paces. He staggers and recovers with his shield raised. You both lower shields and bow your heads in mutual respect. The sergeant orders spear thrusts through a narrow slit in a wooden wall. You step up and grip the shaft just behind the leaf of your spear. You thrust through the slit, catching the guide's club on the inside. You feel your shoulder burn as you force the spear's tip against the wood. You parry a return jab and twist your wrist to disarm your partner. You yank the spear back through the slot with a wet crack of fury and spit into the dirt. You taste bile at the sound, remembering how a thin blade through this slit could mean life or death. Your throat burns, and your lungs ache, but you do not pause. The sergeant next calls for wall scaling drills. A ladder leans against a 6-foot wall of rough timbers. You clamber up the rungs, each step testing your grip in soaked gauntlets. At the top you find a horizontal beam narrow as a plank. You teeter across it, arms outstretched, boots squelching on the wet wood. Below you the mud waits. You catch your balance at the beam's end and drop into a roll that leaves your back stinging. You rise, spit out grit, and rush to the next ladder. After sword and shield and spear comes the poleaxe routine. You heft the heavy axe head high and bring it down on a standing log target. The handle jolts in your hands as iron meets wood. You swing again and again, each strike echoing your rage against the fatigue seizing your arms. The log cracks in long splits. A final strike cleaves it in two. You drop the axe beside you and stagger back, lungs heaving. You taste sweet blood in your mouth. You wipe your lips with the back of your hand and nod in satisfaction at the fallen wood. The heat of the sun climbs high and the sergeant orders mounted drills again. You mount your horse for the 3rd time this day. You feel every muscle protest as you push your thighs into the stirrups and haul yourself into the saddle. You guide your mount toward a slalom of poles set in the field. You lean forward, urging the horse into a gallop. You carve through each gap, barely clearing the poles by inches. You feel the wind rush beneath your cloak and whip your helmet plume behind you. Each sharp turn sends a tremor through your spine. You fight to hold your seat as the horse lunges from one pole to the next. At the final pole you slip, scraping your thigh against the saddle horn. You grit your teeth and stay in the saddle, but the friction burns through your trousers and into your skin. You ride away, ignoring the fire burning on your leg. You can feel sweat dripping down your spine, mingling with the sting of abrasion. You do not dare breathe through the pain. The mounted drills end at last, and you dismount with stiff knees. You plant your feet in the stirrups and slide off, feeling the weight of fatigue in every joint. You lead your horse to the watering trough and pour water into its muzzle. As the horse drinks, you inspect your leg wound. A thin line of blood shows through torn fabric. You tie a scrap of cloth around it to staunch the flow. You taste copper on your fingertip. You return to the courtyard for the final test: endurance. You and your fellow knights line up for a foot race across the field. Each of you wears full armor. At the sergeant's whistle, you break into a run. The plates rattle against each other. Your lungs burn as you pound across the turf. Your chest feels like it will burst through your breastplate. You push on even as your legs feel like lead. You cross the finish line last, but still standing. You collapse onto your back, gasping for air that tastes like metal and victory. When the drills finally end, you limp back to the armory. Each step sends a wave of pain through your feet. You unlace your greaves and peel the plates off your calves. You feel relief flood your limbs as the metal falls away. You shrug out of your breastplate and let it clatter onto the rack. You strip off your gauntlets and feel fingers throb where the leather straps cut into your skin. You breathe deeply, tasting the air that has not been compressed through plate and chain. Your armor lies in a heap on the floor, and you stand in your shift, ragged and filthy, but alive. Each drill you endured has tested your spirit and your body. Each blister and seam has earned you the fierce pride of a knight forged in sweat and steel. You bow your head in gratitude and step outside, ready to endure whatever tomorrow's drills will bring. You rise before dawn's grey light, every muscle stiff from yesterday's drills, and slip into the armory once more. The rack of plate mail waits like a sentence. You grip the breastplate at its edges and lift. The metal is heavier than it looks, every pound of iron a promise of protection and a burden on your chest. You step forward and slide your arms into the pauldron straps. The weight pulls your shoulders down so hard that you halve your height. With each buckle you fasten, the plate draws tighter across your torso. You feel the cold steel bite into your ribs and cling like a vice. You tighten the straps under your arms and across your back. The leather creaks and groans in protest. You stand and swivel your hips against the weight. The plates scrape against the chainmail beneath. You taste metal in your mouth and grit your teeth. Already your body protests the compression. Next come the pole arms. You approach the weapons rack and select a pole axe nearly as tall as you are. The haft is oak-bound in reinforced iron. The axe head gleams with wicked edges and a spike that could pierce mail. You heft it upright and feel the pole's length drag against your boot. You wrap both hands around the shaft and test its balance. You lean into it and feel every ounce of steel and wood shift under your grip. You shoulder the poleaxe and step toward the door. The corridor narrows, and every breath feels labored beneath the weight of your gear. You pull the visor down over your face, and the world shrinks to a slit of dim light. Your limbs feel twice their size, as if stuffed in boiled leather. The poleaxe's counterweight drags at your arm, pulling your head forward. You straighten and stiffen your spine just to keep upright. You step into the courtyard, where a column of knights stands ready to march. The sergeant's horn sounds, and you fall in behind. Every step you take demands effort. The breastplate chafes your stomach with each forward lunge. The greaves bite into your shins with every lift of your foot. The poleaxe presses heavy against your shoulder. You taste sweat before the sun even rises. You march through the gatehouse. The drawbridge clangs behind you, and the chill of the morning air meets your naked flesh at every gap in your armor. You breathe steam into your visor, and feel a tightening in your chest. You swallow against the pressure. Each step sinks into mud or grit, each uneven surface jolting the heavy plates until they rattle across your body. The road ahead stretches mile after mile of stones and ruts. The sergeant sets the pace with a hard beat of his boot. You rise to meet it, matching his stride even as your calves burn and your ankles quake beneath the greaves. The pack horses graze on the shoulder, their loads lighter than your own frame encased in iron. You bite back a curse and press forward. By mid-morning, the sun climbs over the walls. Heat seeps under the metal and cooks you from within. The iron glows against your skin like fire. You feel each rivet piercing through to your flesh. Beads of sweat roll down your neck and soak into the padded arming coat beneath. Your visor steams up and the world goes dark. You tilt your head to let a shaft of light find your eye slit. You rest the poleaxe across your forearm and uncurl your fingers from the haft. Your knuckles are white and raw. You flex each finger and feel the blood surge into numb joints. You raise your voice and ask for water. The squire hands you a leather water skin. You unscrew the wooden stopper and gulp down fluid that feels warm against your throat. You taste grit and iron in the water. Your stomach churns, but you swallow more. You wipe your mouth on the edge of your gambeson and step back into formation. The march resumes. Every slope becomes an ordeal. You plant your foot on the incline and brace your arms against the rise. The poleaxe tilts, threatening to shift your balance. You hunch your shoulders to compensate, and the breastplate slides up against your chin. You breathe shallow and feel your lungs clamoring for space. At the crest of the hill, you feel a hand at your elbow. The squire squirts oil into your joints to ward off chafing. You nod and lift the visor for him. The oil cools the metal for a moment, but the friction resumes instantly with each motion. You clamp the visor down and pivot to face the valley beyond. You behold miles of heath and marsh that promise more miles of plodding. By midday, the party halts for rations. You ease the breastplate free of one buckle and lift it enough to slip your head out. You stand bare-chested in the sun, your face flushed. You pull the poleaxe from your shoulder and wedge it into a stump. You incline your head before your meal. A slab of salted pork and hard biscuit. You take small bites, testing the grease on your tongue. You swallow, feeling the thin nourishment anchor you against the weight of metal and wood. You step aside to don your armor again. The wind has dried the sweat just enough so the plates catch less. You fasten each strap and slide the poleaxe into your waiting hand. The surge of renewal is brief. The moment you lift the weapon, you feel its full weight once more. You test your arm with a swing. Your shoulder screams in protest. You lower the axe and press your hand to your chest. The march resumes at a pace that mocks your exhaustion. You trudge through villages where peasants stare with pity. You grip the poleaxe as if it were the only thing holding you upright. You bite back tears of frustration. Each drop of sweat that drips from your visor tastes of regret. The afternoon sun blazes above as you climb another incline. You lean into the breastplate and stagger. The poleaxe tips forward, and you must catch it with both arms. The rush of movement sends the metal plates rattling across your torso. A fresh wave of cold steel bites at the nape of your neck. You force your legs forward, each step a tiny triumph over collapse. By dusk, the column reaches its destination. You stagger forward and catch the postern gate. You slide the poleaxe shaft into the ground and grasp the gate latch. You knock and wait, every muscle alive with protest. The gate swings open, and you step through into the cool shade of a courtyard. You exhale a breath so deep it rattles your chest. You look down at your body encased in plates and leather. The sun glints off every surface. You feel the strain from head to toe. Your arms tremble around the poleaxe. Your legs shiver beneath the greaves. Your back throbs like a cracked bone. Yet you stand. You have marched through rolling hills and muddy fields under the crushing weight of plate and pole. You lower the visor and turn the poleaxe until its head rests on the ground. You slide your hand up the shaft and stroke the wood as if greeting an old friend. You nod in silent respect for the burden it shares. You test your knees with a half-crouch and rise again unbroken. You lift your visor and breathe in the evening air. The sky glows rose and gold. You taste freedom on the breeze, but know it is fleeting. Tomorrow you will don the armor again. Tomorrow you will march beneath the sun's glare, a knight forged in iron and endurance. But for a moment you stand unguarded, feeling the pain of your body and the pride of survival. You place a hand on the cold head of the poleaxe and whisper, "Thanks. You have carried this weight through dawn and dusk. You have endured the crushing burden of plate and pole. And in that endurance lies the fierce pride of a knight who bears the weight of his calling, step by weary step." You shoulder your poleaxe again when the sergeant's horn sounds for the second drill of the afternoon. The sun hangs high and sears through the narrow opening of your visor. You adjust the padded arming coat beneath your pauldron to chase away the worst of the heat. Then you step forward onto the practice field, where piles of sand and stone wait to test your strength. The sergeant points to a mound of river cobbles stacked 3 feet high. He orders you to clear the stones with your poleaxe in timed passes. You plant your feet in the mud and grip the haft with both hands. You swing the axe high and bring it down with every ounce of your weight. The head crashes into the top layer of stones. Pebbles spray in every direction. You swing again. Sweat soaks your hair and drips behind your neck. You force yourself to ignore the burn in your shoulders and the ache in your forearms. When the horn blows, you have cleared one side of the mound. You stagger back, lungs heaving, and feel muscles twitching to collapse. Next, you are handed a second poleaxe with a heavier head. You fling it upward and grind it down into the sand pile. Each strike sends a tremor up the handle that rattles through your fingers. You hear the wood splinter and taste grit in your mouth. The sergeant times your attempts. He records your score on a stick of wood. You stand panting as the next knight takes his turn. You feel each bead of sweat running down your spine like molten lead. Then the sergeant orders walking drills across the field's length and back again. The catch is that you must carry your poleaxe over one shoulder and hold a heavy sandbag strapped under your opposite arm. You step off into the wet grass with the weight tearing at your side. Each step becomes a negotiation between muscle and will. Your hips twist under the uneven burdens, your knees tremble, your calves tighten until they scream at every footfall. You grit your teeth and march on. On the second lap, the sandbag shifts and tears at the fabric of your gambeson. You pause to readjust the strap, but the sergeant's whistle blasts, and you must push on or lose time. You straighten and lean into the poleaxe to counterbalance the sandbag. With each step, the sodden grass pulls at your boot soles. You feel a blister forming under the arch of your right foot, but you do not dare stop to bind it. You taste metal on your tongue from the hot air passing through your mail. At last the whistle calls halt. You drop the sandbag and release the poleaxe head onto the soft earth. You stand with hands on your knees, back arching as your body seeks relief from the constant drag of metal and wood. You look up at the sergeant, who nods in approval but issues no praise. In his eyes, you register the knowledge that even this great feat is only half the day's burden. The third drill starts almost immediately. You and your fellow knights line up under a long beam suspended 4 feet above your heads. You must hoist the beam overhead, walk its length, and lower it back down in timed cadence. You grip the rough wood and heave until your shoulders crack. You lift it overhead and feel the weight settle into your wrists. You step forward and walk beneath the beam with your arms locked in place. Each step forces your feet to toe a narrow path of stone. You swallow to keep your breath steady. You slide your arms along the beam to adjust your grip as the wood wobbles. Your shoulders burn with lactic acid. Yet you force each foot forward until the beam reaches the end of its path. You lower it and collapse backward onto the ground where dust clings to your sweating skin. Before you can recover, the sergeant orders a run to the palisade fence and back. You rise while sand filters through your arming coat. You shoulder your poleaxe again and break into a jog. Each movement hangs heavy in the mesh of chain and plate. The fence looms, and you bound into a leap that sends your body weight crashing onto your boots. You roll through the landing and kick yourself upright. Your spine reverberates. You stumble back to the start line and heave the poleaxe onto your shoulder. You lift a hobbling sprint for the return. You race the next man, but both of you finish gasping on the stones of the courtyard. By late afternoon, the ground around the armory is churned into mud and the grass is beaten flat. You feel every lump of earth through your greaves. Your armor squeaks with every shift. The weight you bore at dawn has doubled with sweat. You look at your reflection in a puddle of rainwater. You hardly recognize the silhouette beneath the iron. The final test begins at dusk. The sergeant orders you to mount and ride from the stable to the gates and back against the setting sun. You clamber into the saddle with knees shaking. You grip the reins so tight your fingernails cut into your palms. You urge your mount into a trot, and then a canter. The horse's hooves drum against stone. Your muscles jolt with every stride. You lean into the stirrups for the run to the gate. You push your arms forward to steady the poleaxe. You glimpse the sun dipping below the horizon. The air chills and your breath steams behind your visor. You turn for the return and urge the horse into a gallop. Your hand tightens on the haft. The wind roars through your helmet. You feel the weight of iron crush your chest as the horse rockets forward. You hold the poleaxe stable against your shoulder. You fight to keep your seat as the horse rounds the final corner. You lean back and urge it to stop. It slows only after you hammer its flank. You dismount on wobbly legs, every step an ordeal. You guide your horse to the stable and pat its neck before saddling it down. You sway in the doorway of the armory. Your knees bend under you, but they do not give way. You hang the poleaxe on the rack and slide your gauntlets off. Your hands glow red where the straps bit into your skin. You unbuckle your greaves and let the plates fall free. Your legs shiver as blood returns. You remove the breastplate and step away from the weight that dragged you through the day. You stand at the threshold of the armory in the last glow of daylight. You stretch aching arms overhead until your shoulders crack. You breathe deep and taste the crisp night air. Cramping muscles pulse in every joint. Your spine hums with the memory of iron, yet you stand upright and steady in flesh alone. You step across the courtyard and feel the world release you from the crushing weight of plate and pole. You know tomorrow you may bear it again. But for this moment you taste freedom on your skin and pride in the endurance of your flesh. You have endured one more day of brutal training, the hours of drills and the weight of steel, and you have not bowed beneath the burden. You carry the burn of your resolve in every fiber, a testament to the fierce spirit of the medieval knight. You rise before dawn on tournament day, heart pounding at the promise of glory and ruin. From your tent, you hear the trumpets sounding from the lists below, their notes ricocheting off nearby pavilions. You slip into your gambeson and tighten its straps, knowing that soon your armor will follow. A single tilt might bring you honor and wealth, but a single misjudged move can snap your neck or leave you ransomed beyond all hope. Outside the tent you find your squire waiting with a steed shod for traction on soft ground. The horse paws the earth, nostrils flaring, as you lift your helm from its wooden stand. You slide it over your head and feel the leather cap settle against your skull. You fasten the visor straps and lean into your shield. The weight of steel feels familiar yet unforgiving. You taste adrenaline on your tongue as you step toward the waiting field. The lists unfold before you in a wide oval of churned turf. Colorful banners snap in the wind above rows of pavilions. You see banners from distant realms, each one marking a noble house seeking prestige. You feel a pang of envy and resolve. You clutch your lance and adjust your gauntlets. You pass by knights, stretching and cracking joints under their plate mail. Each holds the same mixture of hope and dread. A herald calls your name with booming voice, and you ride forward to the barrier. The tilt rail looms like a spine of oak down the center of the list. You guide your horse onto the gravel beside it. Your shield bears the crest of your family, proud but tattered from past tournaments. You glance at the opposite rail and spot your opponent approaching. He is a hulking man in dark armor marked with a silver wolf. Your stomach twists with the weight of what must come next. Your squire whispers last-minute counsel as you crouch low in the saddle. You lean into the length of your lance, finding its balance point. A single tilt can unseat you and send you crashing into the mud. You taste grit in your mouth as you pop the lance rest from your shield. The trumpet blasts again, and the gates at the end of the lists swing open. You urge your steed forward with calf and knee. The horses charge and the scene slows. You see the silver wolf crest coming fast toward you as you lean forward to brace the lance. The impact rings through your arms and chest as wood meets steel. Your horse rears beneath you and you fight to keep your seat. A spray of splinters flies free as your lance shatters on his shield boss. Your vision tilts, and for a moment you fear the world will spin into darkness. You press down with your thighs and ride past the barrier. You guide your horse to the list exit and feel the breath return to your lungs. You wrench the broken lance from your hand and throw it aside. Your arm throbs where the shaft slammed into your vambrace. You force a steady breath and urge your steed back to the barrier for the next tilt. Each pass brings fresh terror and exhilaration. You meet 3 more opponents in quick succession. You win against a pale knight in dragon scale, but lose to a veteran whose polyaxe shatters your shield. With each victory, you gain cheers and coins tossed at your feet. With each defeat, you feel gold slip from your purse, and the fear of ransom for a shattered helm or broken pauldron. By midday, the field lies littered with splintered wood and bent helms. You have won enough to pay for new straps and polish, but not enough to cover the ransom your last opponent demands for a shattered mace head. Your heart sinks as you count the extra coins needed to reclaim what you lost. You swallow hard and vow that tomorrow you will tilt more wisely and spare your family from ruin. As the sun dips low, the final bout approaches. The crowd gathers in hushed anticipation. The herald unfurls the parchment announcing the champion's prize. You tighten each strap of your armor and mount your horse for one last charge. You grip your lance as if it were the only thing keeping you alive. You lean forward and urge your horse into motion. You feel the full weight of plate and the risk in every heartbeat. And in that moment you know that to live the life of a medieval knight is to dance with glory and death on a single tilt. You lead your mount from the lists into the tilt yard's shadowed corner where the armorers and tent stewards stand ready to mend broken gear. Your helmet bears a crack where a mace slipped past your visor. You step down from your horse and hand your helm to an armorer. He examines the fracture and shakes his head. He cannot repair it without a full day's work, and a fee that eats half your winnings. Your heart sinks as you realize that a single tilt has cost more than a week's worth of meals for your squire and the stable hands. You glance at your horse's flanks, where leather straps have cut shallow grooves into its hide. You paid a smith to fashion those straps for extra grip in the saddle. Now they will need replacing. You taste dust on your tongue as you consider how quickly expenses mount in this life. A single shattered piece of iron can bankrupt a family. You reach into your purse and count coins. You have barely enough to cover the armorer's fee and patch the saddle. There will be nothing left for new cheval legs or spare gauntlets. Your squire lowers his gaze when he sees your empty purse. He rummages in your camp chest and pulls out a tarnished goblet. He steels himself for the auction that will follow tonight in the lists camp. You both know that if you cannot raise enough coin to reclaim the goblet, the Lord of the Lists will auction it along with any remaining gear. You must act quickly, or lose the promise of the coming campaign when knights gather to raise banners for the king's war. You walk through the throng toward the camp's auction ring. Torches flare along the ropes where horses and weapons lie. You see crowned nobles bidding on fine armor and foreign steel. Your heart pounds at the sound of each rise and fall of the auctioneer's chant. The goblet comes up for bid, and the price skyrockets beyond your reach. You hold your hand above your head and quietly withdraw. You feel the keen sting of defeat in your belly as the goblet passes to a distant market lord with deeper coffers. You exit the ring with head bowed and purse lighter than before. Each loss feels like a cut in your spirit. You remember the feast you hoped to bid for your household when you returned victorious. You taste ash on your tongue at the thought of empty tables and silent hearth. You stand for a moment at the edge of the camp and watch the final bidders celebrate their acquisitions. You draw a deep breath and remind yourself that tomorrow you still have a chance to win more at the melee. You return to your pavilion to find letters from your steward waiting by the door. One bears a red seal and smells of lavender. You break it open and skim the lines written in hurried script. Your steward reports that creditors are gathering outside the manor's gate. They demand payment for debts owed during your last campaign. Without funds to cover interest, they threaten to seize a parcel of land you hold at the edge of the village. You swallow hard and feel your knees grow weak. Your loss in the lists now jeopardizes your family's livelihood. You pace through the tent's dirt floor, glancing at the prized broadsword your grandfather carried at Poitiers. The blade glistens with oil, but its edge has dulled from lack of use. You sheath it and lift your visor. You take a deep breath of cold night air and vow that you will not return home empty-handed. You will enter the melee at first light and fight harder than ever before. You will win back honor and coin, or die in the attempt. Morning arrives with a mist that blurs the lists into ghostly shapes. You mount your horse and grip your sword's hilt. The list stands before you, a circle of tents, stakes driven in for your fallen comrades, a canopy under which the king's favorite knight awaits challengers. You steel your nerves and guide your horse into place behind the edge of the field. You feel the eyes of every noble and squire upon you. The banners flutter in slow winds that carry the scent of damp earth. The first melee begins with a clash of swords and axes. Knights hurl themselves into the fray, horses trampling grass and sending mud into the air. You steer your mount to flank a wounded foe. You raise your sword and bring it down in a swift arc. The blade bites flesh and clangs off plate. You pull back and thrust at a second knight who charges your flank. Your arms burn, but you fight on, each blow an act of desperation. You taste fear and iron on your tongue as you press deeper into the melee. You fall back when the horn blows to signal the end of the bout. You return to the saving line, breath heaving beneath your helmet. You tally your winnings and losses in your mind. You have taken 3 pledges of coin and one of your squire's shield. You hand over the shield to the marshal and accept the coin with shaking fingers. You force a bow to the marshal's helmet and turn your horse's head toward the open ground. You know the next melee may be your last chance. The final call sounds, and you charge once more into the field. You hurl yourself through a mass of knights and horses, sword flashing under the grey sky. You hook a rival's breastplate with your sword point and spin. He staggers, and you seize the moment to deliver a heavy blow that sends him toppling from his mount. You spur your horse to claim his gauntlets and coin purse. You feel a surge of triumph that crackles through your bones. The marshal signals your victory, and you attempt to rein in the horse. The spike on a fallen pike catches your boot and sends you stumbling forward. You stagger and catch the reins just before your horse kicks. You steady yourself and lift your visor. You work each arm loose and feel relief as pain blooms under your skin. You ride to the marshal and offer your prize in humble salute. As the marshal places the laurels on your helmet, you feel the weight of your burdens lighten. You taste sweet exhilaration on your tongue. You hear the hush of the crowd before it swells into cheers. You guide your horse in a slow circle, chest heaving, every muscle quivering. You have won your ransom back, and more. You have reclaimed honor and coin. You may even rescue your family's land from creditors. You ride back to your pavilion beneath the fluttering banners. You look at your squire, whose eyes shine with pride. You hand him a pouch of coins and instruct him to settle your steward's debts. You remove your helm and feel your hair damp under the sweat-drenched cap. You stretch your shoulders under the relief of empty armor. You breathe deeply of the morning air, crisp with promise. You stand at the edge of the lists and taste victory's heady promise. You may have faced the crushing weight of plate and pole, the agony of endless drills, and the terror of a single tilt. You may have laid yourself bare to bankruptcy and broken bones, yet you survived. You endured the brutal pageant of tournament troubles and claimed triumph. And in that triumph you find the fierce pride that burns in every medieval knight. You wake before dawn to the blare of the muster horn echoing through the frozen courtyard. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and step into the biting wind. Snowdrifts swirl across the flagstones, where knights and levied men gather, breath steaming in the cold air. Torches line the walls, but their glow does little to chase away the frost. You shoulder your pack heavy with spare gauntlets and a few scraps of salted meat, knowing that today you march into unknown lands on orders you barely understand. You join ranks behind the Baron's banner, a cluster of colors snapping in the wind. Each knight's plume and family crest stands out against the white wasteland. Among you are levied sergeants and common yeomen clad in rough wool tunics and patched gambesons. Their eyes betray fear and resolve in equal measure. The steward reads out the muster roll, calling each name in turn. When your name echoes off the walls, you step forward, bow your head, and shoulder your spear. The Baron's steward proclaims that all able men are required for service in the King's War. You will ride north to meet the rebel host threatening the border villages. No one questions the order. Questions here mean chains or the gallows. You taste the tension in the air as you hear the names of those who failed to answer the call. Some already lie cuffed and bound in the dungeon beneath the keep. You move your horse forward toward the stables. The beast's reins are slick with frozen breath, and the stirrups are iced in place. You heave your leg over the saddle and slip into the stirrup. Your cloak rustles as you settle into the mount, the leather creaking beneath your weight. You pat its neck and whisper a quick prayer for its strength. The horse bucks once, but yields to your reins, ready for the road ahead. The gate opens with a thunderous clang. You guide your horse through the archway into the frozen wastes beyond. The world here is a landscape of white fields and barren trees, their branches clawing at a pewter sky. You force your horse into a steady trot and fall in behind the bristling line of cavalry. Each hoofbeat drums through your spine, as if marking out the march of destiny itself. By midday, the column has stretched for miles along a snowbound track. The wind cuts through your armor and stings your face. You adjust your visor to shield your eyes from swirling flurries. Every movement is an effort as the cold latches onto your limbs. Your gauntlets feel thick with ice. Your breath comes in ragged puffs that cling to the air like white ghosts. Your squire rides beside you, carrying extra rations of hard biscuits and dried beef. He offers you a bite, and you accept gratefully. The bread crunches in your mouth and tastes of grain more than life. You wash it down with a gulp of watered wine from your flask. The liquid warms your chest but sends a chill through your belly. Hunger gnaws at you even as the cold saps your strength. The march continues without respite. Small detachments break off to forage for wood and water. You watch peasants in threadbare coats trudge into the woods and return with meager bundles of firewood scorched with frost. Water must be drawn from half-frozen streams. You feel the weight of your spear and shield press harder against your back as they freeze to the pack beneath them. As dusk falls, the column halts for a meager supper by a frozen copse of trees. You dismount and help raise a hastily pitched tent. The canvas shakes in the wind. You stir embers in the brazier until flames catch. The sheep bones you boiled for broth ooze grease into your bowl of thin soup. You chew each bit slowly, knowing that this is all you will eat until your steed carries you forward at dawn. Night brings no reprieve. The cold seeps into every seam of your gambeson and bites at your bones. You lie on a pallet of straw beneath the tent's canvas. Your armor stands in a frozen heap outside, steam rising where the warmth of your body once pressed against it. You close your eyes against the wind's howl and taste metal and snow on your tongue. You know that tomorrow's march will push you further into the hostile frontier. You will tread fields that belong to no man and cross rivers as stiff as bone. You will face rebels who fight for survival and drive you to fight for lands you do not know. Yet you endure the forced service because that is the life of a knight bound by duty and blood. You shoulder the weight of spear and pack and steel your spirit for another day's march toward collapse. You would not last a moment without the fierce pride that you carry beneath every layer of cold steel and frozen leather. You rise stiff and aching before the pale light of dawn, your limbs bound in the iron hug of yesterday's march. Your visor lifts with a screech of frozen leather, and you blink into the cold world that awaits. The column moves out again, boots crunching on frost-hardened ground, each step sounding like a funeral knell. You grip the spear's shaft as if it were the only anchor keeping you from collapse, and you fall in behind the line as the trumpeters call the muster onward. The morning brings a fresh assault of cold. Your cloak's seams begin to fracture under the sharp wind, and you twist your head to press the mail collar tighter against your throat. Ahead, the road narrows to a track carved through dense woods. Branches hang low with ice, snapping under passing hauberks like brittle bone. You urge your horse through the tunnel of white silence. Each breath you exhale clouds the air before you, mingling with the smoke of campfires left behind. As the sun slides toward noon, the road opens into a plateau, where fellow levies gather wood and cut down saplings to shore up the wheels of supply wagons. You dismount, joints creaking from the cold and the load you bear. You heft a two-handed axe the squire hands you, its haft wrapped in rough linen to ward off frostbite, and drive it into a slender trunk. The wood fractures with a dull crack that reverberates in your chest. You haul the log to the wagon, sweat freezing to your back as soon as it touches the air. Your fellow knights sneer at the conscripts forced into this labor, but your orders are the same. No man is exempt from hauling supplies. You shoulder another log and stagger to the wagon bed. As you bend to stack it, you feel the tapestry of frozen undergrowth snag the edge of your cloak. You curse through chattering teeth and rip free, sending threads of wool floating on the wind like lost prayers. When the wagons groan back to life, you remount with leaden legs and grip the reins until your knuckles go white. The column resumes its march, and you follow, each horse's step, throwing a spray of frozen mud against your boots. Hunger gnaws at your belly harder than the frost, but you dare not kneel to share your scant rations with the foragers. Instead, you slip a dry biscuit into your mouth and chew it as you ride, abandoning the crumbs to flutter across the snow. By late afternoon, the scouts return, with word of an impending engagement. The rebel host lies a day's march ahead, drawn up in a shallow valley ringed by hills. The Baron's steward orders the column to hasten, and you feel the weight of duty press down harder with every mile. You spur your horse into a trot, the metal of your greaves ringing at each gallop like the tolling of a distant bell. Night falls before you reach the battlefield's edge. You hear fires burning in the dark, cooking pits for the enemy as well as your own. Torches wink among the trees, outlining the rebel lines in wavering gold. The steward commands silence and orders the camp pitched at a ridge overlooking the plains. You join in raising a shelter of pavilions, lagging under the strain of your armor and the march that has left every sinew screaming. The firelight flickers across your visor as you kneel beside the brazier. Your squire tosses a handful of pine cones onto the coals, sending sparks arcing into the frigid air. You gratefully hold a bowl of thin stew beneath the smoke. Parsley roots, a single hunk of salted pork, and grains that refuse to soften fully. You swallow each spoonful more to silence your hunger than for taste, and you feel the chill in your bones ease only marginally. No sooner have you finished when the steward's horn calls you to arms. You seize your spear and march through the dark to the muster line. You see the Baron's banner snapping in the chill wind, its edges ragged as your own courage feels through the night. You fall in beside your fellow knights, their breaths pluming in unison as they grip lances and javelins. You spend the remainder of the night in tense readiness, watching the dark field where horses snort and soldiers whisper prayers. You hear the wind sigh through the ranks and taste metal on your tongue with every exhalation. You press a gauntleted hand to the javelin shaft and feel its rough grain against your palm. You whisper a silent vow. If dawn brings battle, you will stand firm. When the first light breaks, a horn blast shatters the dawn calm. You lean into your spear and charge down the ridge with all the weight of plate and pack dragging behind you. The ground quakes beneath the hooves of knights and the clatter of infantry. You shout your war cry into the wind, half defiance, half prayer, and plunge into the frozen valley. The clash is merciless. Spears shatter on steel breastplates, and horses rear in the churned muck. You thrust your spear through tangled lines of enemy shields and feel your arm tremble under the recoil. You taste sweat, blood, and snow in the fray. Each motion drags against you like wading through a winter storm, yet you fight on, every muscle straining against the load of armor. Suddenly, a rebel knight lunges at your flank with a broken pike. You twist your body beneath the falling point and hurl your own spear into his shoulder. His roar echoes like thunder as he crumples, and you wrench free your spear with a wrenching snap. You wade through the surging mass, chest heaving, pack straps cutting into your back. Each breath stabs your lungs like a shard of ice. By midday, the rebel ranks falter. You push forward in a final charge that drives them back toward their camp. You leap over fallen bodies and broken lances, haunted by the faces of men who wore your own colors just days ago. At the camp gates, you lower your lance and herd the fleeing enemy toward the awaiting king's archers. A volley of arrows thunders overhead, and you feel the sickening crack of flight as foes fall. The battle's roar fades into silence as the survivors scatter into the woods. You stand among broken spears and abandoned packs, chest heaving under the heavy plate. The field lies sodden with snow, mud, and the blood of valor and defeat. You taste iron on your tongue and wonder which was stronger today, your courage or the weight you bore through the frozen march. As the survivors gather their dead and tend the wounded, you slip away to the ridge where your camp still smolders. You collapse beside the brazier and strip off your gauntlets. You pry open each finger and feel the pinch of chafed skin where the leather straps bit into flesh. You unbuckle your greaves and peel back the plates. Your legs tremble as the blood returns. You remove your breastplate and let it clatter to the frozen ground. You stand in your chainmail shirt, panting for breath that the cold air fights to steal. You stretch your arms overhead until your shoulders crack in relief. You let the chain links rattle in a hollow hymn to your endurance. The steward's horn blows again, this time for the wounded to be tended and the dead to be counted. You wipe grief from your eyes and sheath your spear. You lean on a shattered pike and guide your horse back to the camp. You feel each ember's glow over your shoulder as you pass. It reminds you that even in victory, the cost of war and the cruelty of forced marches remain etched into your bones. You wake before dawn to the sour stink of stale urine and rotting straw. The trench walls loom above you, slick with moss and slime. Your armor lies abandoned in the command tent, its iron links rattling with rust from weeks of disuse. Here in the siege works, your sword has become nothing more than a burden you dare not polish, for there will be no grand charge today or the day after. You clamber down a ladder of rungs lashed to the trench wall and land in mud that sucks at your boots like a living thing. Every step sends a shiver up your spine as the cold water seeps through cracks in your greaves. You gather by the latrine pit where men squat in ragged cloaks, backs hunched against freezing wind. The air is thick with excrement and decay. A crack in the wooden screen reveals bodies half buried in refuse, their cries hushed by distance and despair. Beyond the latrine, the trench floods into a fetid canal of stagnant water. You inch along a narrow plank that serves as the only dry path. Beneath you, the water teems with sludge and leeches that brush your leather soles. The walls on either side bow inward with damp rot. You taste brine on the air, mixed with the copper tang of blood and the metallic stench of fetid bodies left too long unburied. The day's orders come from a whistle blast, echoing off the stone walls of the fortress you assault. You and the other knights must stand guard through the morning, spears leveled at the gatehouse while crossbowmen rattle their bolts at unseen defenders. You rest your poleaxe against the trench lip and lean on its haft. Your body aches with the chill. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, though it offers little warmth against the damp. Ravens circle overhead, and you imagine them feasting on the carrion that drifts against the palisade. Below, a surge of rats scurries across the trench floor, their fur stiff with mud and fleas. The vermin slip between your boots and vanish beneath rotten bundles of straw. You feel a tickle at your ankle and swat at your gambeson. A flea jumps free in your sleeve. You scratch at the welt it leaves, cursing under your breath as it rains another itching heat across your skin. You strip off your glove and stare at your gauntlet, its plates mottled with green mold. You wipe the rust from the leather strap with your tunic. You slip your hand back inside and grip the haft of your unused longsword. You imagine hewing the vermin and the slime away with a single clean stroke, but the sword hangs heavy in its scabbard, dulled by neglect and the damp. Mid-morning brings the daily ration of mouldy barley soaked in water drawn from the trench canal. A cook ladles the brew into chipped bowls and passes them down the line. You dip a morsel of hard biscuit into the mush and chew slowly, tasting grit and bitterness. Hunger gnaws at your belly, but you force yourself to swallow, lest your comrades see you refuse even this scant meal. The biscuit scratches your throat, and you cough against the chill. A sudden roar from the fortress shakes the trench walls. You snap to attention as a chorus of drums and trumpets bellows from above. The defenders launch a volley of stones and boiling oil that crashes against the palisade. You feel the shock through the mud under your feet. A roar of warning goes up. You knock a bolt for the crossbowman beside you and pull the string. The shot cracks through the air and splinters a wooden shutter on the wall. Yet still, the fortress stands, unmoved. Hours pass in the mire as you and your fellows dig shallow pits and reinforce the earthen banks with wicker panels. Each shovel of waterlogged earth sends tendrils of black sludge into your gloves. You press your palm to the puppet-like horse skull you unearthed, its gaping maw packed with earth and roots. You pry it free and toss it aside. It clangs against the palisade and rattles your teeth. You breathe deep and taste the decay in every breath. By afternoon, the rain begins, turning the mud to a slick of greasy black clay. The rain soaks through your cloak and runs down your spine. You huddle beneath a dripping tarpaulin and watch the trench fill with water faster than you can bail it. You grip the edge of the tarpaulin and pull it taut, but the wood frame splinters under the weight. You curse and beat at the drip until you give up and let the rain fall. As dusk nears, the plague breaks out among the levied men. A young squire clutches his stomach and collapses beside the trench wall. You kneel to help him, but his eyes roll back as fever sets in. He moans in agony. Men shout for the camp medic, but no one comes. You feel sweat bead on your brow, despite the cold. You stand and turn away, mind battering itself against the futility of it all. Night brings no rest. You crawl back into your tent and lie on the damp straw. The tent flaps shudder in the wind. You hear the distant clang of steel from men sharpening swords that may never be drawn. You smell rot and fear as damp gathers on the canvas overhead. You close your eyes and taste slime on your tongue. You dream of clean air and open fields far from this nightmare under siege. Tomorrow you will climb the wall with your fellows, greased with vine, sap, and blood, only to be pelted by rocks and arrows. You will hold the rope to the scaling ladder with gloves stiff as iron. You will rinse the blood from your boots and catch lice in your hair. Your sword will hang heavy at your side, but it will see no glory in this squalor. Yet you endure this misery because that is the fate of every night in a siege. You brace yourself for another sunrise. You will live in foul trenches under slime and pestilence while your blade rusts unused. And in that endurance you find the fierce pride of surviving even one more day beneath the walls of the enemy. You wake to the rasp of coughing in the latrine pit. The air here lies thick with the foam of disease and the stink of rot. You clutch your leaden cloak tighter around your shoulders and step into the shallow trench that serves as the camp's only latrine. Men hunch beside the boards, faces drawn and pale under the hood of their hats. Each cough carries a tremor of fear. Dysentery, typhus, plague, they whisper. Carried by the water you drink and the air you breathe, you drop to your knees at the far edge of the pit, dug into rotted earth near the fortress wall. You unlace your greaves and slide them aside, boots squelching in mud laced with crimson streaks of old blood. Your shield clanks against the wooden palisade as you grip the beam for balance. You taste bile at the back of your throat and curse the life that brought you here. Behind you, a young page staggers, clutching his belly. He collapses against the trench wall and vomits into the mire. His retching echoes off the stone ramparts like a funeral knell. You brace yourself against a post and do your best to look away, but the stench invades your nostrils. You feel the bile rise in your own throat, but you swallow it back down, pride keeping you upright. When your turn comes, you squat on the edge of the pit and let loose into the water. The cold hits you like a blade, cutting through layers of wool and leather straight to bone. You finish and rise, recalling the privilege of the privy at home. Here, everyone shares the same unclean pool. You limp back along the plank walkway to your post at the trench lip. The plank quivers beneath your weight, slick with slime and shredded straw. Beneath the plank, the water gurgles in a thin channel, its surface slick with bits of decayed food and rotting straw. You step onto the muddy bank, the earth giving way under your boot. You curse under your breath and feel the mud suction at your soul, threatening to pull you in. A fellow knight stands guard beside you, cloak draped over his pauldrons like a wet, sagging sheet. He gestures toward the fortress wall, where archers patrol above, dropping clods of earth back down at the trench. Each impact creates a miniature avalanche of mud that cascades into the trench. You lift your visor to call a warning, but the echo of your own voice frightens you. Better to let them clamor unnoticed. You turn your gaze to the mewling forms huddled against the wall's base. Those too weak to stand have been left behind, wrapped in tattered cloaks and huddled under canvas scraps. You recognize the signs of plague in their fevered eyes and purple blotches on their skin. You swallow the lump in your chest and look away. You cannot help them, and your sword is of no use here. The cook's wagon trundles nearby, horses groaning under the weight of iron cauldrons. The cook ladles out a broth of half-rotted turnips and water boiled only to mask the flavor of river sludge. You take a bowl with gloved hands and sip carefully, the heat scalding your tongue. Hunger still tugs at your side, so you swallow another spoonful and press on. By afternoon, the sun breaks through ragged clouds and briefly warms the trench. The slush underfoot steams where your boots have sloshed. You lean on the palisade to catch the faint warmth and feel rivulets of sweat slide down your neck. But warmth is fleeting here. The wind shifts again, carrying the smell of rotting flesh from newly buried corpses outside the trench. You rise before dawn, expecting to find honor's bright pageantry waiting in the armory. Instead, you find the Baron's steward pacing among crates of coin and correspondence. He points to a letter sealed with red wax, and its meaning chills your blood. A fellow knight has defaulted on his ransom. The steward demands your service to cover the debt. You feel the weight of that broken promise more keenly than any armor plate. The dead are laid to rest in shallow graves beyond the camp's site. Each man who succumbs is wrapped in damp canvas and hauled to the ditch by 2 comrades. You have seen 5 bodies claimed this week. A squire who fell in fever, a common bowman ripped by dysentery, 2 knights felled by plague, and an old sergeant whose heart gave out against the cold. You bow your head for each as they pass, sword held in reverent salute. You feel the weight of their passing clench, your chest like the palm of a giant. In the dying light, you patrol the trench, walk with handfuls of hemp rope to mend broken ladder rungs. Each rung snapped from sapping storms and the weight of men falling from shivering ropes. You tie knots with numb fingers, the strands slippery with mud. You curse the craft that once brought you glory and now binds you to this mire. When night falls, the trench becomes a chamber of horrors. The lanterns lining the path sputter with greasy smoke. Shadows twist on the walls like writhing specters. You hold your sword's hilt in one hand, not to strike an enemy, but to fend off rats that leer from gaps in the palisade. You have seen them gnaw at the hands of the fallen, and slip into the sleeves of sleeping men. You pray you will not feel their teeth in your flesh tonight. You settle on a barrel beside the cook's fire and pull your cloak close. The fire's glow is meager, offering no solace against the cold or the stench. You share a loaf of black bread with your squire, breaking it into halves with trembling hands. You toast each half on the brazier, crisping it enough to hold. You bite slowly, tasting the char and remembering soft loaves from home. A single mouthful brings tears of longing to your eyes, but you swallow quickly and turn your face away. Your squire brings water from a distant well, boiled only once a week. He offers you a cup, but you decline, recalling the sickness it spread last time. You shake your head and accept only a sip. You press the cup to your lips and taste grit before setting it aside. You fold your hands atop your knees and rest your head against the barrel's rim. You close your eyes and count the hours until the muster call again. You sleep in fits and starts, body pressed into the hard edge of a broken crate. You dream of spears and armor sheds gleaming in sunlight, of open fields with grass underfoot instead of mud. You dream of fresh bread cooling on your table and bathwater warmed by your hearth. You wake when a guard's horn blasts to signal another patrol. You rise, bones groaning in protest. You clasp your sword and climb the ladder back to your post. You taste metal on your tongue as you peer over the palisade into the black pit of the trench below. Your mind drifts to the wars you once dreamed of, glorious charges and battle cries. Here, glory lies drowned in the mire. You stand sentinel in the stench and the dark, while your sword rests unused and your spirit wearies. At dawn on the morrow you will climb the wall for another day of squalid siege. You will watch dead men buried only feet from your feet. You will taste disease on every breath. You will wear your rusted sword as a reminder that steel is worthless without purpose. And when the enemy finally sallies forth, you will thrust that blade into the terror of battle, and remember the pride that carried you through this nightmare of slime and scourge. In your mind, you recite the code of chivalry that you swore at your knighting. Defend the weak, uphold truth, show mercy, reward the brave. Such lofty words once lifted your heart above the mud of daily life. Now they echo hollow in the stone corridors, where broken vows and cold debts rule. You fasten your helm and tighten your gorget. You steel yourself to do what must be done to survive. The steward orders you to ride at once to the border fortress and deliver coin in exchange for your comrade's freedom. You mount your horse and feel the irony bite deep under your breastplate. You ride past peasant huts where families scavenge roots from frozen earth. You see children huddled beside smoky hearth fires whose flames barely stave off hunger. You taste guilt as bitter as iron on your tongue. You wonder which deserves your mercy more. At the fortress gate, the captain demands interest on the ransom fee, 12% per week since the night's capture. You hand over a pouch of coin that nearly empties your coffers. The clink of silver in the captain's palm sounds like betrayal. You swallow hard and bow. Your comrade will walk free today, but at what cost to your honor? The ride back is bleak and silent. Your horse's hooves echo on the frozen track as you dwell on the bargain made in the stead of chivalry. A knight's oath now measured in coin rather than courage. You feel the gulf widen between the ideals you cherish and the reality you endure. Back at camp, you find a sergeant baiting new recruits forced to hold the line in your stead. He offers the mail only if they sign a document pledging loyalty above all else. Even to acts that breach the code of chivalry, greed for men-at-arms and tax, revenue swallow, mercy and mercy's reward. You cannot abide such hypocrisy. You stride into the sergeant's tent, your polished boots crunching on broken earth. He looks up and sneers. Commander orders you to fill ranks or lose your pay. You remind him that the code demands mercy for those who serve in good faith. He laughs. You feel rage flare beneath your cuirass, but you hide it behind a forced bow. You return to the lists and see a page practicing tilts at dawn. He tilts at a wooden dummy that bears your crest. The boy's hilt slips and the sword grazes the wood. The dummy falls. You steady him and speak gentle words of encouragement, yet you know your ransom drained your purse. You cannot provide the golden prize you once promised. That evening, a squire arrives at your pavilion. He brings news that a noble from across the sea seeks recruits for royal service. They promise land and coin enough to clear your debts. You feel the lure of redemption. Yet you recall the code that forbids abandoning your lord in the midst of siege, your comrades in hovel and trench. You sit at your meager supper of salted pork and hard bread. You taste salt and shame in every bite. You ponder the gulf between honor's promise and the brutal bargains that fill your days. You imagine how a code of chivalry written on vellum must face trials in the mud, and gore of reality midnight finds you beneath a sky of stars that witness all promises broken and all bargains made. You press your gauntleted hand to your sword's pommel and vow to keep your oath even when every breath of mercy demands a price in accordance with your ideals, rather than the ledger of coin dawn breaks with trumpets summoning you to muster. You mount your horse again, weary from your ride and worn by compromise. You fix your gaze on the horizon, where the banners snap, in wind against the ruins of a world that demands sacrifice. And you ride forward, knowing that the greatest battle a knight ever faces is the struggle to reconcile the code of chivalry with the harsh reality that shapes every blade and every soul beneath the sun. You wake to the muffled clink of chains and the low murmur of voices beyond the tent flap. A footman steps inside, bearing a parchment edged in black. You catch a glimpse of the Baron's seal before he breaks the wax and unfolds the letter. Your heart hammers as you read the news. Your comrade, Sir Aldrich, captured during the last patrol, remains unredeemed for lack of coin. The ransom demand is staggering silver by the sackful, far more than your modest estates can yield. You rise from the straw with a sinking pit in your stomach. The code of chivalry demands you ransom a fallen brother, yet your coffers lie nearly empty after fitting plate and sending men down the march. You pace the tent floor, mind racing through ledgers and debts. The steward's ledger clutches at your breath. Loans taken to finance tournament entry, horses sold to muster supplies, corn mortgaged to feed your household. None of it prepared you for this. You stride to the squire's chest, and unlatch it with trembling hands. Inside lie hastily saved gold nobles, enough to cover a fraction of the ransom. You count them thrice and find barely a third of what the captors demand. You tuck the coins into a leather purse, every piece a promise you cannot keep. You stare at the empty corners of the chest and wonder which friend you'll betray next to raise the rest. You mount your charger and ride through the camp to the stables where the squire waits. Your horse's flank gleams with sweat under its tacked-on barding. You whisper an apology as you slide from the saddle. You hand the horse's bridle to the groom and push the beast toward the auction block. In moments, you watch gold change hands for the only steed that once bore you to victory. The loss chafes more than any iron strap ever could. With the horse's sail barely covering half the ransom, you press on to the manor's grain stores. You bid against merchants for sacks of barley meant for food rations, but now offered as collateral. The bailiff's eyes gleam as he weighs each sack like a miser measuring his treasure. You cough down the protest rising in your throat and sign away half your spring grain. The scribes wax the deed. Your family will hunger when fields lie fallow. Your journey leads next to the jeweler's stall, where a locket of your lady's hair hangs in a silver clasp. You taste ash in your mouth as you hand it over, the ring of the clasp the last thing you see before darkness. You think of her gentle smile and the promise you made on the day of your betrothal. That promise now lies buried beneath heaps of unpaid debts. Back at camp you tally your losses. Charger gone, grain mortgaged, locket surrendered. You are still 2/3 short of the ransom. A forced march to the nearest town's moneylender beckons, but your cloak and mail remain impounded as further security. You trudge through the mud toward the moneylender's brick house, each step dragging the weight of dishonor across your pride. The moneylender sits behind a desk of polished ebony, eyes like chips of coal. He offers coin at a ruinous rate, 20% interest for every fortnight until the debt is repaid. You swallow and nod, penning another deed that wears your signature like a noose. You walk away with purse heavy with borrowed gold, and a soul heavy with regret. The interest alone will bleed you dry. As twilight falls, you ride back to the captor's camp. You kneel beside a tattered pavilion where Sir Aldrich lies chained. His armor is battered, his body gaunt from weeks of captivity. You press the borrowed gold into the jailer's hand and watch as the man begins to count the coins. Each clink in that brief silence reverberates in your bones. At last the jailer shoves back the purse and snaps open the manacles. Sir Aldrich rubs his wrist raw and stumbles to his feet. You brace him by the shoulder. He looks at you with hollow gratitude and tries to speak, but his voice cracks with shame. You cannot meet his eye. Instead, you offer him your cloak and help him mount the nearest cart. Each rattle of the wheels reminds you how far you have fallen. You ride back to the trench camp in near darkness, wheels clattering through frozen ruts. Sir Aldrich slumps beside you, wrapped in rough blankets and the memory of his own ransom. You both know that this victory carries a dangerous price. Your creditors circle like wolves, tallying the interest that grows with each passing day. Your estate teeters on the brink. Over the next fortnight, you attempt to repair your fortune. You pour every spare pfennig into merchants' coffers and gamble at the lists in desperate hope. You drive peasants' rents to higher rates, earning the hatred of those who once served you faithfully. You raid tithes early, storing grain in hidden barns that you guard through the night. You feel your soul grow dark with every transgression against the oaths you once held sacred. Before long, the moneylender demands more in interest than you paid in principal. He threatens to seize your remaining land at the edge of the fief, the fields that fed your family for generations. You ride to the manor court to plead for more time, but the Baron's steward delivers a swift verdict. The lands will be auctioned next dawn. Your cousin must attend as a witness to his own family's ruin. That night, you lean against the wall of your pavilion and taste dust on your tongue. Sir Aldrich stands beside you, unarmored and broken, but your glance at him holds no comfort. He rests a hand on your shoulder, a silent apology for the debt that cursed you both. You close your eyes and feel the gulf between the code of knighthood and the legid realities of ransom demands yawning deeper than any castle moat. At dawn, you attend the auction ring with your cousin. The Baron's steward unveils a map of your estate, rolling pastures, 3 cottages, a small orchard. Bidders from neighboring knights and merchants encircle the mound of barred deeds. The price rises with every bid. You swallow hard as the hammer falls 2 strokes above the amount you once thought enough to save the realm. The deed is struck from your hand. Your cousin steps forward to pay the balance with his own slender purse, rescuing part of the estate. You clasp his forearm in gratitude and shame. The steward draws a line through your family crest on the charter, marking your branch of the house as diminished. The orchard and 2 cottages remain in your name, but the fields that sustained your household vanish into the steward's waiting ledger. You lead Sir Aldrich back to the trench camp on borrowed horse, estates reduced to a handful of holdings. He regards you with pity, but you refuse to accept his pity. You grip the reins and ride back through the mud-laden roads, every hoofbeat a dirge to the wealth you once commanded. By nightfall, you return to the battered tent you still call home. You slump beside the brazier and press blackened hands to your face. You taste iron on your lips and grit in your mind. You recall the days when a knight's ransom was a matter of honor, when lords protected their vassals and knights rescued comrades without draining the welfare of entire villages. Now that code is a ghost, haunting barons' courts and flooded trenches alike. You ponder the bargains made in the name of chivalry, sale of a charger, the mortgaging of grain, the auction of land sand. You wonder if any price is too high to spare a brother's life. You lean back against the tent pole, head swiveling to the slit that frames a sliver of moonlight. You whisper a vow that as long as one spire of your remaining land stands, you will repay every debt and restore your honor. Yet you know that the road ahead will be paved with more sleepless nights, more ransoms, and more ruined holdings. And as you close your eyes against the dark, you taste dust and gold and bitter resolve on your tongue. You sleep with the knowledge that the greatest battle a knight ever fights is not on the field of war, but in the accounting halls where honor clashes with coin and estates crumble beneath the weight of ransom demands. You rouse before dawn in a world turned white and silent. Snow lies heavy across the ground, thicker than any blanket you ever owned. Your gambeson is soaked through with yesterday's thaw, and the chill bites at every stitch. You rise without complaint because there is no warmth left in this place, except in the promise of reaching the next village. You step into the cold and feel the snow give beneath your boots almost up to your shins. Each footfall demands effort, like wading through a frozen sea. Your cloak drags through the drifts and collects crusted ice at the hem. You press on, shoulders squared against the wind that cuts through fabric to your skin. Every breath tastes of frost and fear. The column moves in single file through the wastes. Knights and footmen alike lean on their spears to steady themselves. In front of you, a squire pushes his horse through the snow until the animal's flanks heave with exhaustion. You glance at your own mount, whose coat is matted with hard ice. You whisper a word of comfort and share the last handful of oats you carried from camp. The horse eats greedily and nuzzles your hand in thanks. By midday, the sun peeks through ragged clouds, but brings no warmth. Ice glitters on tree limbs like rows of broken glass. You halt for a brief respite beside a stand of pines. The ground here is firm enough to sit. You strip off your gauntlets and rub your fingers until the numbness returns. You break a piece of stale bread from your pouch and chew it, slowly tasting dust more than grain. Hunger hammers your belly sharper than any blade you have wielded. Your squire retrieves a tin cup of watered barley, and you drink it in slow gulps. The liquid is tepid at best, and leaves a thin film of grit on your tongue. You press your free hand against your ribs, hoping the warmth will keep your lungs from freezing. You swallow and cough into the snow. A sharp ache tears through your chest at the sound. The march resumes as the wind picks up and snow begins to fall in thick flakes. You lift your hood and force your cloak tighter. You inch forward, following the crushed path behind you. Each step is a negotiation between will and exhaustion. You slog past rocks and stumps hidden beneath the drifts until your boots strike stone with a hollow crack. Frostbite strikes without warning. You feel a sting in your toes as the blood retreats from your boots. You pause and kneel in the snow. You beat your foot against your other leg to coax blood back into the numb tissue. You curse the folly of empty promises that led you into this waste. You press on anyway because there is no turning back. As afternoon darkens into dusk, you reach the edge of a broken road. The old cobbles lie half covered in ice. You guide your horse onto the stones and feel the animal struggle to find purchase. You slip twice before catching balance. You taste iron in your mouth when your teeth grind together. You swear silently and force your mount onward. You wake before dawn to the stench of death hanging in the chill air. Bodies lie abandoned where they fell, draped in torn cloaks and blanketed in frost. Every breath you draw tastes of rotten decay. You step into the trench that serves as the camp latrine and slip in mud laced with black ichor. Squatting beside the muck, you recall the luxury of a private privy back home and feel a hollow ache in your gut. Around you, knights and conscripts huddle in threadbare cloaks, faces drawn and pale beneath their helmets. Above, ravens wheel against a leaden sky. Their cries echo across the freezing camp. You lean on your spear to steady yourself and turn toward the new plague pit. A shallow pit already half filled with corpses drips with frozen blood. A handful of pallbearers shovels earth onto the heap without ceremony. With every scoop, the stench grows more cloying. Rats dart between limbs stripped by frostbite and disease. A young page staggers forward, clutching his belly. His fevered cough rends the silence like a dying beast. He collapses against the trench wall and vomits into the slime. You grip your sword's hilt and force your gaze away. Mercy has no meaning here. A command barked by the steward sends you to the makeshift infirmary. Inside the tent, arching smoke from pine branches blends with the odor of herbs and sweat. You kneel beside a dying knight whose fingers clutch a broken sword. You press a cup of spiced wine to his lips. He sips once, then stares into nothing as his heart stills. You close your eyes and feel guilt rise like bile. Outside the tent, you find a guard dragging another body toward the pit. You turn your face to the wind and taste ashes on your tongue. Hunger lurches in your ribs, sharper than any blade you have wielded. The camp bell tolls again, and you know another victim will fall before sunset. Night falls with a sudden gust of wind. Torches from the rear guard flicker and threaten to go out. You light a small lantern and hold it before you. The glow glints on icy brows and red eyes. You see the faces of men who once laughed and fought by your side, now drawn in hollow lines. Hunger and cold have carved them into ghosts of their former selves. Your captain orders camp for the night at the first ruined manor you reach. You clatter through the gate and park your horse in a sodden courtyard. A handful of logs lie in the corner. You gather them in numbed arms and build a small blaze. Sparks pop as the wood spawns smoke. You warm your back against the blackened stones, but you feel only a faint tingle in your ribs. In the flickering light, you break the last rations of salted pork wrapped in coarse cloth. You cut thin slices and pass them to your squire. He eats with gratitude, though each swallow brings a wince of pain. You taste salt and blood in every bite. You close your eyes and remember feasts before the war. You recall tables piled high with roasted fowl and steaming pottage. You force the memory away because it offers no hope here. You sit by the fire until your cloak is dry enough to wear again. You remove your boots and rub your calves, testing the flesh for frostbite. You pinch oozing skin into your fingers and feel a flash of pain. You wrap your legs in spare linen and tuck your boots close to the embers. The heat flickers across your soles and awakens your nerves in jolts of warmth. When the fire dies, you slip inside the manor hall for shelter. The roof has collapsed in places, letting snow drift across the floor. You pile broken timbers into a corner and ignite them with flint and steel. The blaze sputters and grows until it burns with a fierce glow. You kneel before it and press your hands to the heat. You taste smoke on your lips and wonder how long it will last before the timber gives out. You lie on a patch of straw your squire gathered near the stable. You pull your cloak close and feel the stiff fabric against numb shoulders. The cold continues to seep from every plank in the floor. You grit your teeth and close your eyes. Hunger thuds in your gut like a drum warning of collapse. You embrace the ache because it reminds you that you are alive. When dawn arrives, you will rise again to the howl of the wind and the march through drifts deeper than your stature. You will march with frostbitten feet and a belly that gurgles in protest. You will taste hunger sharper than any blade in every swallow of meager broth. Yet you will ride forth against the storms and the cold because that is the fate of a knight on winter campaign. You will endure each frozen dawn and starved night because honor demands no less. You wake before dawn to the stench of death hanging in the chill air. Bodies lie abandoned where they fell, draped in torn cloaks and blanketed in frost. Every breath you draw tastes of rot and decay. You step into the trench that serves as the camp latrine and slip in mud laced with black ichor. Squatting beside the muck, you recall the luxury of a private privy back home and feel a hollow ache in your gut. Around you, knights and conscripts huddle in threadbare cloaks, faces drawn and pale beneath their helmets. Above, ravens wheel against a leaden sky. Their cries echo across the freezing camp. You lean on your spear to steady yourself and turn toward the new plague pit. A shallow pit already half filled with corpses drips with frozen blood. A handful of pallbearers shovels earth onto the heap without ceremony. With every scoop, the stench grows more cloying. Rats dart between limbs stripped by frostbite and disease. A young page staggers forward, clutching his belly. His fevered cough rends the silence like a dying beast. He collapses against the trench wall and vomits into the slime. You grip your sword's hilt and force your gaze away. Mercy has no meaning here. A command barked by the steward sends you to the makeshift infirmary. Inside the tent, arching smoke from pine branches blends with the odor of herbs and sweat. You kneel beside a dying knight whose fingers clutch a broken sword. You press a cup of spiced wine to his lips. He sips once, then stares into nothing as his heart stills. You close your eyes and feel guilt rise like bile. Outside the tent, you find a guard dragging another body toward the pit. You turn your face to the wind and taste ashes on your tongue. Hunger lurches in your ribs, sharper than any blade you have wielded. The camp bell tolls again, and you know another victim will fall before sunset. You mount your horse and guide it through the ranks of tents and bodies. Each hoofbeat echoes like a funeral drum. You grip the reins and steel yourself for another day in this living nightmare. You will see more plague pits filled faster than heroes ever charged into battle, yet you remain here bound by duty and dread. You step through the shattered archway of the ruined keep long after the camp has fallen silent. Moonlight filters through collapsed walls onto broken flagstones. A handful of knights and footmen gather in the darkness, voices low and urgent. Each face is drawn in the shifting glow of lanterns, and every shoulder bears the weight of impossible choices. At the center of the circle stands Sir Merrick, his helm tucked under one arm. He uncorks a clay flask and passes it around, each sip a silent pledge that every throat here will hold its peace. He speaks of tyranny and broken promises, of villages plundered and families starved for coin to ransom soldiers home. His words echo against the crumbling walls as he lays out a plan to rise against the barren steward whose greed eclipses the code of knightly duty. You grip your sword hilt so tightly your knuckles whiten. You think of the oath you swore beneath the chapel vaults, to serve your lord faithfully and uphold the code of chivalry. Yet you also recall the faces of peasants who starved while silver spilled from the manor coffers. You slow your breath and let the conflict settle hot in your chest. a man cannot serve both the blade and injustice. A murmur runs through the group as Sir Merrick explains the timing. At first light you will seize the gatehouse, unseal the prison, and free those held for debts or disloyalty. You will cut the chains of knights whose ransoms remain unpaid, and treat the bailiff's ledger as a call to arms. He gestures toward the fractured dungeon door and reminds you that your comrade Sir Aldrich sits behind those bars, broken by plague and betrayal. You glance at Sir Aldrich, gaunt and leaning on a makeshift crutch. Each breath rasps against his lungs like a dying wind. His will to live is fierce, yet he remains shackled for lack of coin. You kiss your gauntleted fist to his brow, the metal cold against his fevered skin. He whispers gratitude that you would risk your life for him. You step back into the circle and nod your assent to the plan. A sentry stumbles into the courtyard, nose bleeding from a blow slipped in some forgotten brawl. He freezes at the sight of armed men in midnight cloak. You raise a hand to still him and press a finger to your lips. He swallows and nods, stepping back into shadow. The crunch of his boots fades into silence. You realize how thin the line is between conspiracy and slaughter. At the cliff above the gatehouse, you find the old rope ladder hidden under moss and stone. You slip it free and secure it to the parapet with a length of rope. Each knot you tie feels like a verdict passed in the dark. You hoist your sword and lead the climb with measured care. The stones beneath your boots crumble, and you catch yourself with a quick thrust of steel into mortar. When you reach the top, you drop down behind the wall walk and draw your sword in a single fluid motion. Below, 2 guards huddle by the gatehouse door, warming their hands at a brazier. They glance up at the sound of sliding stone and the soft hiss of steel on masonry. You steel your voice and shout a command in the Baron's name. They spin, eyes wide, as you grip their spears at the shaft and wrench them free. You disarm them with brutal efficiency. Their helmets roll across the flagstones like hollow echoes. Behind you, the rest of the group descends into the courtyard. You urge them onward as you swing between broken walls, every footfall a drumbeat of revolt. You reach the dungeon and slam your sword pommel into the heavy iron latch until it snaps free. The door groans and swings inward. You step aside as Sir Aldrich staggers into freedom, tears of relief streaming down his face. The clamour of steel on stone rings out as you lead the prisoners toward the gate. You feel the stir of hope and fear tangled in the air. The moment you emerge onto the drawbridge, you find the steward's men arrayed in a half-circle, swords raised. Their captain sneers and demands to know if this is mutiny. You tighten your grip and step forward, voice clear as a blade's edge as you call them to stand down or face justice for their master's crimes. A tense silence stretches across the courtyard. You see doubt in the eyes of half the men before you. They remember the steward's lash and the bribe of gold that filled their purse once but left their honor rotting. At your signal, they lower their swords and step aside. The captain reconsiders and wipes sweat from his brow as the tide of allegiance shifts. By dawn, the drawbridge is lowered to admit the rebel knights. You ride through the gatehouse under banners hastily painted with your own crest. You feel the surge of victory and the weight of every oath broken or redeemed. The castle walls echo with the cries of peasants freed from the dungeons below. You release a breath you did not know you held and feel the cold air burn your lungs to life. In the throne room you find the Baron's steward clutching a ledger to his chest. He curses you as traitor and thief. You advance without fear, knowing that in the chaos you have already seized power that his coin could never command. You tear the ledger from his hands and brand it as treason. A knight at your side breaks the iron clasp of the manor door and throws the steward out into the snow, stripped of office and coin. You take your place on the raised dais, where the steward once stood. You bow to your new company of knights and retainers who now swear allegiance to justice rather than gold. You remember the code of chivalry you once recited in boyhood. Defend the weak, uphold truth, show mercy, reward the brave. You recite it now in action rather than words, each promise a stone laid in the foundation of a new order. The blood of betrayal flows through every corridor you pass. You know that some men will never forgive this revolt. Some lords beyond these hills will brand you outlaw and traitor. You have traded loyalty to tyranny for loyalty to your comrades and your conscience. You wonder how many battles this choice will cost you. You taste the tang of steel on your tongue and the hope of dawn's promise in your heart. As the sun rises over the shattered towers, you raise your sword in salute to the men who followed you in secret. You feel the weight of every oath broken and every bond renewed. You imagine the day when the code of chivalry will reign again in every keep and every field. But for now you stand in the ruined keep, your heart resolute in the face of betrayals and revolts, determined to live by the true honor of a knight. You wake before dawn with every bone in your body aching as if hammered by relentless blows. The first light finds you wrapped in sweat-soaked gambeson and clinging chainmail that stiffened in the night's cold. You pull the helm from your head only to feel the bruise across your temple where the visor pressed too hard. You rise without complaint, because this is the only life you know. By the time the crier's horn sounds, you have already marched through mud that clings to belt and boot, driven stakes into palisades with arms trembling from fatigue, and braced your shield against the clang of practice weapons. You have walked the gauntlet of sword drills until your wrists burned and every finger joint throbbed with agony. You have ridden through wind and rain, the reins cutting into your palms, each gallop sending pain through your shoulders. At midday, the sun beats down on the barley fields you once swore to defend. Now you haul water buckets across trenches flooded with slime and rot. Every step stings as ice melts into muck beneath your greaves. You swallow the thin broth of turnips and stale bread that passes for sustenance. Hunger claws your belly sharper than any blade you have wielded. In the afternoon you stand guard on the ramparts under a sky heavy with thunder. A single misstep could send you tumbling into the moat. Your armor pulls at your limbs as if trying to drag you down. You taste metal on your tongue as you swallow dust that blows over the wall. You find strength in the weight of your own resolve. When the raid arrives, your sword remains sheathed. Instead, you hurl stones and pour boiling oil down on invaders whose faces you cannot see through the grate. You grip the iron and feel its heat scorch your skin. You taste fear and triumph in every splash of molten pitch. By evening, the plague has broken out among your ranks. You stumble past fevered comrades whose cries echo in the half-light. You bury them in shallow pits outside the camp, their bodies swallowed by the earth faster than mercy can follow. You press linen to your mouth against the stench of death. You force yourself onward because survival demands it. Night brings no rest. You wrap yourself in cloak and chainmail to stave off the chill. Fleas and lice infest every seam. You scratch at your legs until they bleed. You dream of soft beds and clean clothes, but wake to frost on your eyelids and the waggle of a fallen flag above the keep. Before dawn on the morrow, you ride again, your charger's flanks slick with sleet. Each hoofbeat pounds through your bones. You swallow water that tastes of ash and steel. You march through villages too poor to offer shelter. You huddle beneath ruined roof beams and whisper prayers to saints who have long since abandoned this place. Your ransom comes due at the Lord's court. You trade your best sword and pledge your estate to free a brother-in-arms captured by brigands. You walk away with half a purse and a fraction of your pride. You taste regret in every coin you hand over. When the campaign ends, you return home, a shadow of the man who left. Your fields lie fallow for lack of seed. Your family stares at empty larders. You carry a letter demanding tithes for the harvest you barely sowed. You shoulder the guilt of a debt paid in sweat and blood. You stand at dawn on your own doorstep, armor stripped away, belt empty of weapons, body raw with scars and fatigue. Yet you carry a fierce pride that no blade can sever. You survived every dawn to dusk torment. You endured the weight of steel on bone, the lash of winter wind, the ache of hunger sharper than steel. You faced death in plague and siege and betrayal. You bore the agony of every trial and refused to break. In the quiet of the morning you taste hope on the air. You clutch the hilt of a simple dagger and vow to rebuild what was lost. You will plant fields and fill your barn. You will honor the code of chivalry, not with words, but with deeds of mercy and courage beyond the battlefield. You will carry the memory of each torment as proof of your strength. You would not last a day as a medieval knight if you doubted your own resolve. But you did last countless days, and now you live to tell the tale. You stand between past and future, stained by blood and pride, and in that you hold the fiercest achievement of all, the knowledge that no matter how brutal the dawn, you rose to meet it. You look to the horizon and feel the sun warm your battered bones. Each scar on your flesh tells a story no chronicler can capture in parchment. Your allies remember your steadfastness when the world fell apart. Future squires will hear your tale and know what it meant to carry steel and honor through flame. And though the world may change, the spirit forged in that crucible remains unbreakable.